Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm 20 years old and interning in the Public Affairs and Communication Department at CVP Investments. I'm a member of the cohort known as Gen Z. From changing expectations to shifting priorities, my generation is actively reshaping our approach to work. And to discuss this, we've brought together Gen Z interns to share their views on career, work-life balance, and more. We welcome Joanna. Thank you so much, Joanna, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. So, hi, I'm Joanna, and I'm a 19-year-old intern in total fund management.
Thank you, Joanna. And we also welcome Brett. Thank you so much, Brett, for joining our conversation today.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me. I'm 21 years old. I'm a tech and data intern, and I'm super excited for our discussion today.
Thanks, Brett. So to start off, I'm going to ask you both, what are the three things that matter most to you in a job? Let's start with Brett.
That's a really good question. I think the three things that matter the most to me in a job would probably be learning opportunities, the ability to have an impact, and the ability to indulge my curiosity in a given field. So, for example, at CPPIB, we work with a lot of investments, and one of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever received is that when you're younger, you should be investing in yourself and what you know. So I really like to look for job opportunities that show that there's the capacity to learn and the capacity to build new skills. But then with that, I've always noticed that I feel the most motivated by work that has an impact. That can be an impact, just more generally speaking, on the community or on society, but that could also be having a really positive impact in the team with which you work. And then I'm also, I would say, a pretty curious person, so I really like to have some new experiences with new job opportunities, kind of get a better understanding of what I like and dislike, so that I can go more towards careers that I enjoy in the future.
Completely agree. Yeah, opportunities for growth are super important. And as you mentioned, like company culture, like the workplace environment, the people. So having people that are like really supportive, they're really positive, and having like an inclusive environment is something that's really key. What about you, Joanna? What are three things that matter most to you in a job?
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of items that Brett brought up. So, for example, one item I care about is having a dynamic and fast-paced environment. So, like Brett said, we're still young in our career. And so, as a result, I want to learn and experience as much as possible. I'm not 100% sure where exactly I want to go or what exactly I want to do. So, I think having a lot of experiences can give me more clarity. Another aspect I really care about is that human interaction or mentorship component in a job. So I'm personally very social. I love talking. So I find it very attractive to work in a very collaborative environment where I'm able to see my teammates and work together. And then lastly, also pretty similar to what Brett mentioned, having an impact. I feel the work can be interesting or fun, but most importantly, it's nice to know that my work actually contributes to something bigger than me and that actually makes a real difference. So I find that's where the fulfillment aspect comes in. And so having impact in the job is very important to me too.
Absolutely agree. Self-fulfillment is definitely a key component, and having people that recognize your work is also something that's super important. So completely agree with both of you in all aspects. So shifting gears a little bit, how do you think this differs from your parents or previous generations? What do you think they valued most in a job? Let's start with Joanna.
Yeah, of course. So, in terms of how I think my values might differ from my parents, I would say a key one is first, I very value a dynamic and fast paced workplace. But I feel that my parents might value stability more because they're older than me and they already have a family. And so they may want to settle down and they don't want to move around as much. Compared to me, who I'm more open to traveling for work because I'm still young and I want to see the world. And also, I feel because I'm younger, I tend to have more energy. And so, stability is not the biggest priority for me right now. Instead, I want to look for experiences that give me exposure to many different experiences because there's so much I want to see in life.
Yeah, completely agree. I think personally for me, like I value also, as you mentioned, opportunities for growth. Whereas my parents, specifically my mom, she values more like working close to where her job is. So like having a close location and also having a sense of fulfillment in her job, which is also something that I value. So in that regard, we both align. What about you, Brett? How do you think that differs from what your parents value, and what do they value most in a job?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing both of your responses because I feel that, my values and my parents' values are different kind of on from different circumstances. Both of you kind of mentioned the idea of age contributing to differences in career values. Like you might want more stability when you're older, or you may want a more fast-paced environment when you're younger. I think with my parents, one thing that I've found is that they were probably a bit ahead of their time, because I think a lot of the values that we associate with Gen Z and their values in the workplace are pretty relevant to them. They both made some pretty lateral career moves early on in their career, I'm sure it took them a bit longer to get to where they are now, but they both love their jobs and love, looking back on their career prospects and how they've progressed through their careers. But in the case of generational differences, it was really evident to me when they were talking about when they were first looking for jobs, how different Gen Z was for finding a job than, say, my baby boomer parents. For my parents, they looked a lot more for stability. They started with nursing and engineering careers, and they really wanted that stability. And for me, I definitely appreciate stability, but I'm more so looking for some opportunities that can help me identify what I like and dislike. So I think some of those things that older generations have had to have learned throughout their lifetimes are kind of stuff that we've been taught from the beginning, because those have become valuable to them.
Talking a little bit about balance, flexibility, which are things that maybe our generation prioritizes more. What does a balanced workday look like for you? And maybe if you could describe it to us. And Brett, we'll just keep going on with you.
I think that when it comes to a balanced workday, there's probably three key points that go into there. I really like to learn something during a nice, productive day. I like to be able to practice what I learned. That can be either what I learned that day or a little bit earlier. And I also like to be able to communicate some of my progress and hopefully make a contribution to the team that's more than just a deliverable. So in my current job right now, I'm working with a lot of software. I'm doing a lot of coding. Kind of an example of what that learning might look like would be a one-on-one talk with my mentor, where he walks me through a new technology or new software architecture on the team. And then for the rest of the day, we kind of get into that second point of practicing. I get to practice coding with that new technology, practice interacting with that software architecture. And then at the end of the day, I'd hopefully like to be able to give some sort of insight that's helpful to my team, whether that be fixing a bug and making sure it doesn't happen again in the future, whether that be, finding new best practices for dealing with a certain technology. All of those things really contribute to kind of a balanced work where you get to mix some kind of nuts and bolts, hands on the computer coding with some more interaction with your coworkers and communication. So for me, that's probably what a good balanced workday would look like for me.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to have that mix of interaction between, sit down, focus, desk work and working more like in a collaborative team setting, like speaking one-on-one with your mentor, I think is also super important because you're able to gain insights, especially because I assume like, your mentor is already more progressed in their career. So you're able to like learn things that otherwise you probably wouldn't have done if you just like sit down on your computer the whole day. So definitely completely agree with your points. So, Brett, could you speak a little bit about workplace flexibility, flexible work hours, or remote options? How important is workplace flexibility to you and why?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up workplace flexibility and flexible hours, remote work, because I think that a lot of Gen Z is kind of misrepresented in people's assumption about our preferences on this topic. I think that we generally associate Gen Z with wanting a lot of flexibility in their day, maybe a preference towards remote work. But for me personally, I enjoy the community that comes with in-person work. I find it's nice to be able to interact with somebody face to face, to know where they are in relation to you in an office. And in complete honesty, I don't mind working regularly scheduled hours or longer hours. I think what's most important there is just knowing that the work that those hours fill is meaningful. So I think my answer to that question is maybe a bit more reflective of the heterogeneity of our preferences as a generation. I'm sure there probably is a general trend towards, preferences towards more flexible work hours or more remote work, but I definitely think there's a lot of variability in how we would like to go about our workday.
Those are really great points to make. I think I'm also someone who really enjoys in person and like being in office. Like I think it's really nice to be able to communicate with your team like in person, like face to face. I feel like you're able to facilitate like a quality of interaction and connection that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have in the screen. So I think in that way, maybe I have different views that are different from my generation. But I will say remote working and having more flexible work hours and adaptability are super important. And they can be especially helpful if you don't really live that close to the office, or like if you have something that comes up, for example, if you have like an appointment that you have to get to, and if your work is able to be like understanding and kind of adapt for those real world problems that sometimes occur in your daily life, I think that's really nice and it makes you feel really supported. So, moving on, just shifting gears, what does workplace diversity mean to you and why is that important? And Joanna, we'll start with you.
Yeah, of course. So when I think of workplace diversity, I think a lot of diversity of experiences. So having people with different experiences and backgrounds. So this can mean maybe they grew up in a different country, maybe they went to a different school, maybe they went to a different program. So having these different life experiences and these different career paths, I feel give everyone a wider perspective on life. So this can be helpful in the workplace because having a diverse workforce means that there may be more insights that some other people wouldn't have seen otherwise. And also, I also found it very helpful also for my personal development. I really loved chatting, reaching out with different people and learning about their career journeys. I found it was very interesting how people had maybe not the non-traditional way of getting to their current situation, their current role. And I feel I can apply that to my own life. And so having a diverse range of advice and also perspectives is really important to workplace diversity.
That's a really good point that you brought up, that like workplace diversity is about having different cultures, nationalities, but it's also about like having people from diverse range of skills and experiences and also from like different walks of life. So as you mentioned, people maybe that didn't really have a traditional career, maybe they started in tech and now they're in like some other career. So I think for me, it's super important. Workplace diversity for me is really important. It promotes more inclusion, helps bring a stronger team, and even helps with like creativity, because when you put together a bunch of different people that have different walks of life and different experiences, you're able to come up with like more ideas and more solutions for like problems day to day. What are the top three qualities that you value in an employer? Brett, let's start with you.
The paramount quality that I would look for in an employer is someone who can understand the impact that our team is making or the impact that I would make within my work. So, as I mentioned earlier, impact can mean a lot of different things. For one, that could mean, a more societal impact or an impact on the community, but that can also mean the impact within a company. For example, I'm working on a project right now that's helping to speed up some people's workloads, and it's really been interesting to speak to other people on my team to the impact this will bring to the company, also to other people within the company on what kind of impact that will give in their day-to-day work. So seeing kind of that recognition towards the work that's being done is super important. I'd also say a really important quality is somebody who recognizes what I'm looking for in a job as being important. So understanding that, indulging in curiosity, opening up new learning experiences is something that's super important to building better employees, and somebody who can open up those opportunities. And lastly, I think one thing that's super important in an employer is somebody who understands how to cultivate an environment that is indicative towards collaboration, and somebody who knows how to pull people together to help solve a common goal. So I think those would probably be the top three qualities that I'd look for in an employer.
Yeah, I can second that for sure. I think also having an employer who's like really honest and transparent is super important for me, because being able to have like a connection that's built on trust and mutual understanding is something that I really strongly value and really appreciate. I would also say like having someone that has really strong communication. So someone who's also really clear on like what their goals are and like what I need to do in my job, but also willing to listen and kind of support me throughout. Someone who wants like the best for you in your career, wants you to grow, and kind of listens to the feedback that you have, I think is really important. And lastly, someone who has appreciation and also recognition for the day-to-day work that you have, I think is super nice and really helps with career and self-fulfillment. But happy to hear your insights, Joanna, so I'll pass it on to you. What are the top three qualities you value in an employer?
Yeah, I second a lot of what Sarah and Brett have said about the qualities they value in an employer. But particularly, I remember Brett mentioned having an employer that is supportive of your goals and professional development is something that also resonates with me. So, for example, at the start of my term, my manager asked me to draft up a list of my goals. And so she tried to cater my experiences and my work so that I can achieve these goals. And I found that it was really nice and supportive of her. So, I also feel that speaks volumes about the culture in general, in the department, and in the fund overall. So that's something I very much value. Another aspect that really stood out to me is having perhaps more mentorship like culture. So I know at CPP we all get our designated mentor, but I've met so many different amazing people that even though I only have one formal mentor technically, I'm lucky to say that I have gained multiple informal mentors during this term. And so that's something I'm very grateful for and something that I very value in an employer.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think having that mentorship aspect is super important and really key and makes you feel like more part of like the company culture and more honestly connected to everyone because they kind of can show you the ropes on how to do things. And it's really nice to have that support system. So I definitely second a lot of what you're saying. Let's move on to generational differences. So let's talk about female generational differences. Joanna, how do you think the work life of you or your female colleagues differs from one that other generations had, such as, for example, your mother?
Yeah, so on the topic of female generational differences and how maybe my career path might look different from my parents or my mom's, I can only speak to my own experiences, but I think a big difference is opportunities available. So, for instance, my mom never did internships, but I'm fortunate enough to have done an internship here and the opportunity to do more internships in the future. And so, as a result of that, I feel I have more exposure to different companies and different professions compared to maybe my mother, who I know she stayed in the same company for her entire career. She's very happy there, but I think for me as like someone who's more new to the corporate world and who wants to explore more, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to leverage these internships and experience a lot more before I decide on a career path.
Yeah, completely agree. I'd also say, like, one thing for me that I've noticed is like now with technology being a really big thing, a lot of the things in our day to day work are like automated, or we can use like Gen AI to kind of like help facilitate or help expedite a process. Whereas, like, maybe other people in previous generations didn't really have this tool available to them. So that's like another thing that I was like thinking about when I was like, let me think about like generational differences. I would say like the tools that we have available now, for example, as you mentioned, like internships, I feel like before it wasn't maybe as heavily emphasized, but now it's really nice that like, a younger demographic, younger generation can have these like hands-on experiences and kind of have exposure to different industries and help them think about what do they want to do with their future career. So definitely something that I've really enjoyed. Brett, what about you? How do you think the experiences of your female colleagues differ from previous generations of women?
Yeah, speaking as someone who isn't a woman, I'm providing a bit more of an outside view on this question, but I guess I can provide some insight as to how this conversation relates to tech, since women were a notoriously represented industry in tech only a decade or two ago. One time I remember I was getting in touch with a project manager in tech for a company that, I was looking to work at, and I asked her why she decided to go into project management. She had an engineering background. It seemed like she was really passionate about a lot of the engineering work that was being done on the team that she was managing. So I was curious. And she mentioned that she initially started as a software engineer, but she just didn't feel there was really the space to thrive in that field as a woman. She didn't see a lot of community within the spaces she worked in. And so eventually she just decided to go into project management because she found that there was more opportunities and more community for women in that field. And so I think when we're discussing generational differences, this might be the biggest contrast that I have been able to see in my day to day because I know a lot of women in my classes who are keen to become engineers who have a lot of other women to look up to, and I think that kind of speaks to the importance of having role models and having people who look like you and who might come from similar backgrounds as you in positions that are traditionally dominated by other demographics. So I think that one of the biggest differences we'll see from Gen Z is a lot more women in tech, and we're already seeing that difference play out nowadays. And, just from seeing my classmates enter their internships. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what comes from that and what kind of insights that will bring.
Yeah, so super good point, Brett. I think that nowadays we're seeing a lot more females in positions where it was more like male dominated, so that's super nice to see. So super good point that you brought up, and highly agree with you on that. So thank you so much again for both of you for being part of this conversation today. Thank you so much, Brett.
Yeah, thank you. I had so much fun today.
Yeah, likewise. It was great to see your insights and to hear more about what you have about this topic. And thank you so much, Joanna.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you so much to the Gen Z interns for joining us today. We really appreciate your insights. For more on this subject, please see the latest research report from CVP Investments Insights Institute.